Welcome. Wherever you are right now, curled under a blanket, eyes beginning to droop, or simply searching for a quiet place to rest your thoughts, you've arrived at the right moment. Tonight, we're going to drift slowly into the medieval world. A place of candlelight and stone walls, of worn sandals on cold floors, of whispered prayers and whispered politics. You may have heard that monks in the Middle Ages lived peaceful, simple lives, far from the world, far from war. But tonight we'll begin by pulling back the heavy wooden door of the monastery and stepping into a world that was anything but peaceful. From there we'll wind our way through a trial that shook the conscience of the Church. We'll lose ourselves in the intricate beauty of sacred books, and finally we'll visit the extravagant dining halls of bishops, where feasts were as rich in symbolism as they were in flavor. No need to remember every name or date. Just listen. Let the rhythm of the past carry you like the quiet toll of a bell echoing through stone halls. And so, as the world around you softens and stills, let's begin with the life of a monk, and why it was not as silent as you might think. Segment 1. Why being a monk in the Middle Ages wasn't peaceful, the daily life of a medieval monk, filled with structure, hardship, and silence. The bell tolls softly, calling you from the narrow cot in your dormitory. There is no speaking. There is no pause, you rise. The prayers begin, not sung with joy, but chanted in a slow, unchanging rhythm. The sound fills the air like a fog. The halls are lit only by a few sputtering torches, their smoke curling against the high ceilings. A calm immersion into physical discomfort, emotional discipline, and spiritual labor. Monastic sleep was broken into fragments. One might rest for just a few hours before rising again. Discipline, not comfort, was the rule, the kind that lingers in your breath, curling from your mouth like mist. Imagine yourself waking in total darkness. The cold is immediate. Not the gentle kind of chill you can shake off with a blanket, but a deep, stone-born cold that seeps into your bones. The rule of St. Benedict demanded near total silence outside of prayer. Only essential speech, and only at designated times. To speak at the wrong moment could invite penance. It is just past midnight. For serious infractions, isolation, silence upon silence. This is Matins, the first of 8 prayer services that mark the monastic day, dividing it not by meals or sunlight, but by devotion. You shuffle along the cloister, bare feet brushing worn stone. A reminder, always, that comfort was a temptation. In the chapel, rows of figures kneel silently. Their robes are coarse and brown, made of simple wool. You take your place, lower your head, measured not in hours but in devotion. A life not of peace but of purpose. There was rhythm. The day moved forward like a great wheel turning slowly. Prayer, labor, silence, prayer again. They were also places of tension between discipline and desire, between the heavenly and the earthly. Beneath the chanting and the candlelight there was often exhaustion, and sometimes rebellion. And yet your mind is heavy with more than scripture. You are tired, not simply sleepy but wearied in your bones. Outside the chapel, the work never ends. A slow and contemplative descent into one of the most infamous ecclesiastical trials in medieval Europe. After lauds, you'll scrub floors, tend to the herb garden, or copy manuscripts in a chilly scriptorium where ink stiffens in the pot. This is not a courtroom, though judgments are passed here. It is somewhere in between, a space made sacred and political at the same time. Others remained, becoming abbots or chroniclers. A few were buried beneath the cloister floor, their names carved into simple stone slabs. Meals are brief, eaten in silence, broken only by the voice of a reader reciting passages from Scripture or the life of a saint. And speaking of silence, this is no gentle retreat into quiet contemplation. Punishment, too, was structured. A monk who disobeyed might be forced to eat on the floor, or fast an entire day, or be denied communion. It was not a prison, but it was a kind of surrender. Even the robes worn by monks were chosen for humility, not warmth. Scratchy wool in winter, sandals even in the snow. She heard them first in the garden of her village, then in dreams. Then always, and yet for all this there was order. Some monks found peace in this, others suffered under it quietly, and some perhaps carried doubts they never spoke aloud. Monasteries were not only places of faith. Riding at the head of soldiers, though she had never trained for war, there were monks who fled, who left behind the cold stones and strict silence to return to the world outside. But the rhythm continued, day after day, bell after bell, prayer after prayer. You can almost hear it now, the tolling echo of time itself. And so, with the weight of silence behind us and the cold stone walls fading into the distance, let us quietly turn our gaze to another chapter of medieval life. A trial, a girl in armor, a courtroom where faith and fear collided. The war was not only for land, but for legitimacy. No lawyer, just her voice strong, insistent, and remarkably calm. For who had the right to rule and who had the right to speak in God's name? Segment 2. The trial of Joan of Arc the Church versus a teenage girl in armor, faith, fear, and politics. Imagine yourself not in a battlefield but in a long, vaulted hall, cool, shadowed, quiet except for the faint creaking of wooden benches and the distant echo of boots on stone. This is not a church, though the walls are lined with symbols of faith. It is Rouen, the year 1431, and a young woman stands before her judges. Her hands are bound. Her eyes steady. She is 19. Her name is Jean. Not because they are foolish, but because they are not. But history remembers her as Joan of Arc. Her voice, she claims, was not her own. It belonged to saints, to angels, to something higher, the moments of silence. She said they guided her, told her to lead an army, to drive the English from French soil, to crown the true king, and so she did. Wearing armor, carrying a banner, to her followers she was chosen. A shepherd's daughter made holy. To her enemies and to the churchmen now judging her, she was something else entirely, troubling, disruptive. She has resumed her convictions. Her voices have returned. Her head is bare. A sign is hung around her neck, relapsed heretic, apostate, idolater, possibly dangerous. But the trial was not about her victories in war. It was about her soul. Or, perhaps more accurately, about her usefulness. Politics and faith had folded into one, and Joan of Arc, girl, soldier, visionary, was gone. Joan stood accused of heresy, of dressing in men's clothing, of claiming divine visions, of disobeying church authority. And yet the trial itself was far from impartial. The room is filled with clerics and scholars, nearly 70 in all. Joan has no advocate. She is questioned day after day about her visions, about the Archangel Michael, about her choice of armor, about whether she believes she is in God's grace, a question that was both trap and test. Joan replies with clarity, even wit. "If I am not," she says, "may God place me there. If I am, may God so keep me." The men across from her shift in their seats. To them, her answers are dangerous. She is not hysterical. She is not ignorant. She is composed, intelligent, stubborn, and above all she is sure. In her faith, in her calling, that, perhaps more than anything, unsettles the court. For weeks, the interrogation continues. The records meticulously written down by scribes capture each word. The rhythm of questioning, the deflections. But slowly, methodically, the verdict is prepared. She is found guilty. First of wearing male clothing, then of heresy. She is sentenced to die. But in a brief moment of fear or confusion, she recants, signs a confession, is offered life imprisonment. For a moment, it seems her path will end, not in flame, but in darkness. But days later, she is found again in men's dress. And so the court decides she is a relapsed heretic. The punishment is final. The morning is gray when she is led to the stake. As the flames rise, the silence is nearly complete. Later, some say they saw a white dove rise from the smoke. Others say there was only ash. 25 years after her death, a second trial, a posthumous one, cleared her name. But in the moment, in the cold shadow of Rouen's walls, the church had spoken. And yet, her voice still echoes, in court records and legend. In memory, now, let us turn from fire and faith to something quieter, to the flicker of candlelight on painted pages, to monks hunched over parchment, to the mysteries hidden in books not meant to be read quickly, but to be beheld. Segment 3, the Book of Kells and Other Sacred Treasures, Monastic Artistry and the Mysteries Within Illuminated Manuscripts. A quiet, meditative journey through ink, gold leaf, and the devotion of hands long gone. Now, close your eyes and imagine yourself in a room without time. It is neither day nor night here, but something in between, a perpetual dimness lit only by the soft amber glow of oil lamps. The walls are thick stone, muffling the sounds from outside. The air smells of vellum, dust, and candle wax. Each sits hunched at a wooden desk, hands steady, quills sharp. It is cool and still. You are in a scriptorium. All around you, monks work in silence, not the silence of exhaustion, but of reverence. This is the word made visible. They are not simply writing. They are illuminating. Each page they touch is a kind of prayer, a slow unfolding of thought into color, of belief into image. For this is not just a book. Among these treasures of ink and devotion, one stands apart. Another reveals the face of Christ, abstracted, almost geometric, flanked by animals, angels, and strange symbols from the corners of Celtic tradition. The Book of Kells. The ink is handmade from soot, oak galls, and iron salts. The pigments lapis, lazuli, orpiment, vermilion brought from distant lands, ground into powder and mixed with egg white or honey. Created in the 9th century, perhaps on the remote island monastery of Iona or later at Kells in Ireland, it is a manuscript of the 4 Gospels, but it is also something more. It is a tapestry in miniature, a universe compressed into the turn of a page. Monasteries were targets, and yet, in the face of violence and fire, monks made this, a book of impossible beauty, not to resist war but to preserve wonder. The lines are so intricate that even now, with magnifying glass and digital photography, scholars find new details: tiny animals hiding in loops, faces peering from vines. The pages are made of vellum prepared, calfskin smoothed by hand until it gleams faintly. The book is not read so much as seen. One page shows a carpet of spirals, endless knots of gold and green, lines so fine they seem to hum with motion. Letters bloom into life. The Chi-Rho monogram, the first 2 letters of Christ's name in Greek, bursts across a page in an explosion of pattern and color. The Book of Kells was never meant for casual use. It was too ornate, too fragile. It may have rested on the altar, brought out only on great feast days, but it was also, in its own way, an act of quiet defiance. And yet errors were inevitable. In the margins of some manuscripts, you'll find quiet commentary, a monk complaining about the cold or his tired eyes or how long the page took. At the time of its creation, Ireland faced raids from the Vikings, brutal, fast, and devastating. And the Book of Kells was not alone. Across medieval Europe, other sacred treasures were being born in ink. In Lindisfarne, off the northeast coast of England, monks created the Lindisfarne Gospels, mixing Celtic, Romang, and Germanic styles into a singular form of devotion. In the court of Charlemagne, the coronation Gospels shimmered with classical balanced gold on purple parchment. A nod to the emperors of Rome, each book was a world unto itself, a harmony of text and image, a way of praying with color instead of sound. The work was painstaking. One mistake in a letter could mean days of rework. These weren't just works of divine devotion. They were deeply human, and despite their fragility, many survived, hidden in crypts, smuggled in carts, bound in wooden covers and wrapped in cloth. Today, when we see them behind glass, we marvel at the skill. But perhaps what we should notice more is the time. The time it took, hours, weeks, years. A gentle contrast between sacred discipline and elite indulgence within the church's upper echelons. The patience, the stillness, until it opens slowly into something grand, the silent rhythm of brush and quill. In a world that moved slowly, these books moved even slower. But that was the point? Above you, wooden beams arch like the ribs of a great ship. Tapestries hang heavy, muffling the cold. He wears not armor, not sackcloth, but robes of velvet and fur. A gold ring gleams on his finger. His voice is measured, his gestures precise. Around him sit clerics, nobles, favored guests. They depict saints, lions, knights, and miniature scenes stitched in silk and wool. They weren't made to be consumed, they were made to last, to be turned one page at a time, to be contemplated. And now, as your thoughts begin to slow with them, let us leave the scriptorium behind. Let us follow the monks not to silence, but to feasting. There were rules of hierarchy, of etiquette, of liturgical calendar. A dish of eel pie might still be presented in a vessel of silver. Abstinence, after all, need not be uncomfortable, at least not for a bishop. On certain days Lent, Advent, or Friday fast meat disappeared from the table, replaced by stewed legumes or salted fish. Coarse loaves were for the kitchen, for servants, for monks. Their halls were not just for prayer, but for power. Cooks stirred pots over open hearths. Servants hurried with platters balanced on rough towels. The bishop rarely saw them. A new wall for the cathedral, a possible visit from the crown. These were the conversations that shaped towns and parishes, decided rents and taxes, all while lamb cooled on pewter plates, hoping for scraps. Sometimes they received them scraps of roast, bread soaked in broth. Charity, delivered from a side door, wrapped in linen. He rarely heard the arguments, the dropped spoon, the burn marks. The feast, like the church, was meant to appear seamless. The bishop might sip from a goblet engraved with scenes of saints and martyrdom, while quietly enjoying a vintage older than some of his guests, followed by fish or fowl heron, perhaps, or roasted capon. Delicacies served not for nourishment alone, but as a symbol of station. To the bishop's hall, where gold glinted on goblets, and the church showed another face, one of power, of privilege, and of quiet indulgence. Segment 4. Feasting in the bishop's hall, clerical luxury, wine stores, and power beyond kings. Now, let your mind shift once more. Step away from the dim stillness of the scriptorium. Let the scent of vellum fade, and instead follow the warm flicker of torchlight down a long stone corridor. This is not a monk's cell. This is not a chapel. This is the bishop's hall. The walls are high, vaulted, echoing with quiet splendor, about how slowly lives once moved. How purpose was measured in footsteps, in candle marks, in prayer, how even struggle had rhythm. Let the scent of wax and roast meat drift behind us. The air is warm here, gently perfumed by roasted meat, wood smoke, and the earthy sweetness of wine. At the long center table, the bishop is seated. The contrast could not be greater. Here, in the higher echelons of church life, luxury was not shunned, it was curated. Bishops were not only spiritual leaders. They were landowners, politicians, diplomats. Some ruled more territory than kings, some commanded armies. And nowhere was that power more quietly displayed than in the feast. A typical evening might begin with pottage, a warm, thick soup of barley, root vegetables, and herbs from the garden. There was bread of coarse soft and white, the finest made from sifted flour. Wine flowed freely, often imported from Gascony, Burgundy, or beyond, stored in cool cellars beneath the hall. Between courses, musicians played softly harp, lute, recorder, their melodies drifting like incense through the hall. And yet, even in such opulence, the church's presence remained, grace was spoken, meals were structured. But even this austerity was cloaked in refinement. In the kitchen, the rhythm was different. Outside, in the courtyard, a beggar might wait with others. But the bishop remained inside. He might discuss matters of diocesan concern. A land dispute. To be a bishop in the Middle Ages was to walk two paths at once. One led to the altar, the other to the treasury. And in the great halls they built, both paths were lit by candlelight, warmed by fire, and paved, often with silence. The monks labored. The scribes wrote, the faithful prayed, and the bishop dined. All part of the same church, all part of the same rhythm, each playing their role, some in shadow, some in splendor. And now, as the last course is cleared, and the hall begins to quiet, let us take our leave. Let the music fade, let the embers glow. It is time now to return to the present, to soften the edges of these memories, to settle the past like dust beneath a pew, and to bring this long night's journey to a close. And so we've walked 4 paths tonight, through the strict, cold life of the monastery, through the trial of a girl who believed she heard God, through the gold and ink of sacred pages, and through the warm, quiet halls of power. We've moved through hardship, through wonder, through silence and splendor. And perhaps in these stories you've found something not just about history, but about time itself. And now, As the present returns to you quietly, gently, you may feel yourself drifting. Let the sounds of the past fade like the last toll of a distant bell. Let your breath slow. Let your body rest. Let sleep arrive like a monk's first prayer at dawn, soft, steady, and full of peace. Good night, and thank you for listening.